Hi everyone, it's me, Miss Keeley. What a blessing it is to join together again this week. Let's take a look back at last week, and then we'll see what's in store for this week. Last week, we learned about this big word, sovereign, or the sovereignty of God. Remember that sovereign means in charge. And when we use it to talk about God, we're saying that He is in charge of or in control of everything. And Pastor Dave taught us three things about the sovereignty of God. One, that God keeps all things. Colossians 1:1 tells us that Jesus holds all things together. And two, God orders all things. He not only keeps them together, but He orders the way in which they happen. And everything that does happen, He allows to have happen. And number three, that God uses all things. Romans 8:28 tells us this beautiful promise that God uses all things together for the good of those that love Him and are called according to His purpose. Notice how it doesn't say everything will always be good. We know that's not true. Bad things do happen, but rather that God is using the bad and the sinful and wrong things in our world and in our lives for good. The Bible is full of lots of examples of God's sovereignty, but the most amazing example of it is the cross. Jesus was perfect. The Bible tells us He was without sin. And it was wrong for the people to hurt Him. It was wrong for Him to have to die the death of a criminal. But God used something that was wrong and bad, and He used it for our good. He used it to save us so that we could come into relationship with Him. Another example of God's sovereignty is the Israelites being led out of Egypt. And we heard about this in Miss Joyce's Old Testament story from last week. Remember that God sent 10 plagues so that Pharaoh would finally let the people go. And God led them through the wilderness, and He protected them with a cloud and fire by night so that they would know that He was with them. And then through Moses, He parted the waters of the Red Sea so that roughly over 1 million Israelites could walk across dry land to safety. And as if all of that were not enough for us to see how incredible and powerful our God is, He then stopped the Egyptian army so they could no longer follow the Israelites. And remember that Pastor Dave showed us with a bowl of water how he tried with everything he could to part that water, but he couldn't do it. And Moses wouldn't have been able to either without God's power and God's sovereignty. And then Pastor Dave told us that we should try to hold water in our hand. Did you try this at home? I know I did, and it wasn't very much water. But Isaiah 40:12 says that God says, I can hold all the waters of the earth in my hands. That's how big our God is. And our memory verse from last week reminds us of this as well. Let's go ahead and say it together now. The Lord does whatever He pleases in heaven and on earth, in the seas and all the depths. Psalm 135:6. Very good. God is in control. He is sovereign. And do you remember what this means for us, boys and girls? That we can trust God because He is in control of all things. And this leads us into what we're going to talk about this week, and that is prayer. What is prayer? And how does it have the power to change our hearts and our circumstances when we trust that God is working everything together for us who He loves?